Hi, I'm Lauren. My parents gave my sister our entire family business, worth millions, while telling me I was worthless and would never amount to anything. Some people just don't have what it takes. My father said with that cold smile of his. But the worst part wasn't being cut out of the company. It was the years they spent hiding my achievements, taking credit for my work, and telling me I wasn't good enough. While they were busy building my sister's career, I was laying the foundation for something they never saw coming. Then came the night of the National Business Awards, when my name was announced as CEO of the Year. Their faces as they watched me walk across that stage to accept the award, that was the moment they realized they'd buried the wrong daughter. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. I arrived at the Westlake Convention Center just as the early evening sun cast long shadows across the parking lot. The autumn air carried a hint of crispness, and I could feel my heart pounding as I straightened the lapel of my navy blazer. Tonight was the National Business Awards, and despite everything, a part of me still wished my family could be proud of what I'd built. I checked my reflection in the rearview mirror of my car. Professional. Composed. Nothing like the scared little girl who used to practice presentations in front of her bedroom mirror, hoping for just one nod of approval from her father. I applied another coat of lipstick, the bold red, a reminder of the woman I'd become, not the one they'd tried to make me. Inside, the ballroom was already filling with people in expensive suits and elegant dresses. Crystal chandeliers caught the light, throwing scattered rainbows across the cream-colored wall. I spotted the Porter family table near the stage, prime placement, of course. Nothing but the best for Porter Hospitality Group. My mother Eleanor sat with perfect posture, her silver hair styled immaculately. My father Richard was already deep in conversation with some investor, his hand gestures animated as he probably talked about their latest acquisition. And there was Vanessa, my sister, laughing at something someone said, the diamonds on her wrists catching the light every time she moved her hands. None of them had seen me yet. I took a steadying breath and made my way to my assigned table. Thankfully, on the opposite side of the room, my assistant, Marcus, stood as I approached, pulling out my chair with a smile that reached his eyes. "You look ready to conquer the world," he said, low enough that only I could hear. "Let's start with conquering my nerves," I replied, grateful for his steady presence. The other people at my table were a mix of investors and partners in summit stays, the boutique hotel chain I'd built from nothing over the past 5 years. They greeted me warmly with genuine respect in their eyes, something I'd never seen when I worked at Porter Hospitality. As the waitstaff circulated with trays of champagne and appetizers, I tried to focus on the conversations around me, but my eyes kept drifting to the Porter table. 8 years had passed since that day in my father's office when everything changed, but the memory still had the power to make my stomach clench. I had just turned 26 and had been working at Porter Hospitality since college. My proposal for a new branch of eco-friendly, experience-focused boutique hotels sat in a leather portfolio on my lap. I'd spent months researching markets, sustainability practices, and consumer trends. The numbers were solid. The vision was clear. "You wanted to see me, Dad," I'd said, stepping into his corner office with its wall of windows overlooking the city skyline. He didn't look up from his computer. "Close the door, Lauren." I sat across from him, the leather of his executive chair cool against my back. "I've finalized the proposal for the boutique hotel concept. I really think this could open up a whole new market segment for us." I slid the portfolio across his desk, pride and nervousness battling in my chest. He glanced at it, not bothering to open it before pushing it aside. "That's not why I called you in." My mother and Vanessa walked in then, neither acknowledging me as they took seats on the plush leather sofa against the wall. I looked between them, confusion settling over me like a fog. "We've made a decision about the future of Porter Hospitality," my father said, finally meeting my eyes. "Vanessa will be taking over as Executive Vice President of Operations, effective immediately." The position I'd been working toward for years, the position he'd hinted could be mine if I just worked a little harder, stayed a little later, sacrificed a little more. "I don't understand," I said, my voice embarrassingly small. "I've been heading operations for the Eastern region for 2 years now. Our profits are up 18%, which Vanessa will continue to build upon," my mother interjected, her tone dismissive. "She has the right instincts for this business. Lauren," She always has. Vanessa didn't even have the decency to look uncomfortable. She just examined her manicure, a small smile playing at the corners of her mouth. What about my boutique hotel concept? I asked, gesturing to the portfolio that now seemed painfully insignificant on the edge of his massive desk. My father sighed, the sound heavy with disappointment. Lauren, these trendy little ideas are exactly why you're not ready for real leadership. This company was built on reliability, on tradition, not on chasing whatever passing fad catches your interest. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. It's not a fad, I insisted, heat rising to my cheeks. The data shows a clear market shift toward experience-based travel. This could position us ahead of— Enough, he cut me off, raising a hand. The decision's been made. The board voted yesterday. Yesterday, they had called a board meeting without telling me. They had voted on my career, my future, without even giving me the chance to speak. And my position? I asked, already knowing the answer. You'll report to Vanessa now, my mother said. Her voice clipped. Unless you don't think you can handle that. The implication was clear. Be grateful for what we give you, or leave with nothing. Vanessa finally spoke, her voice dripping with false sympathy. Don't worry, sis. I'll make sure to give you projects you can handle. I looked between them, these three people who were supposed to be my family, and saw nothing but cool assessment in their eyes. No love, no belief, just a shared certainty that I wasn't good enough. Some people just don't have what it takes, Lauren, my father said, turning back to his computer. It's better you accept that now. I stood, knees shaking but voice steady. And my proposal, leave it, he said, not looking up. I'll review it when I have time. I knew he never would, just like he'd never read any of the other ideas I'd brought him over the years. Ideas that mysteriously appeared in company initiatives months later, credited to other executives or, more often, to Vanessa. I walked out of that office without my portfolio, but with something new taking root inside me. A cold, clear certainty that I would never find what I was looking for within those walls. 2 weeks later, I resigned. My father didn't try to stop me. My mother called a childish tantrum and said I'd come crawling back when reality hit. Vanessa just smiled that same small smile and said, "Good luck out there." Back in the present, the MC tapped the microphone, pulling me from my memories. The award ceremony was about to begin. I sipped my water, wishing it were something stronger as the introduction started. The first few awards were for innovation, sustainability, and community impact. Each winner walked to the stage amid applause, gave their speech, and returned to their table with a gleaming trophy and a sense of validation that I understood all too well. We all want to be seen. We all want our work to matter. When they announced the nominees for CEO of the Year, I barely registered my name among the others. Being nominated had been surprise enough. Summit Stays was still relatively small compared to the hotel giant. I was the youngest nominee by at least a decade, and one of only 2 women on the list. And the winner of this year's CEO of the Year award. The presenter paused, building suspense as he opened the envelope. Lauren Porter, founder and CEO of Summit Stays. For a moment I couldn't move. The people at my table erupted in cheers. Marcus squeezing my shoulder as he whispered, "You did it, Bob." The walk to the stage felt surreal, like I was floating above my body, watching myself move through space in slow motion. I passed the Porter table on my way. My father's face had gone completely blank, a mask I recognized from childhood, the one he wore when he was blindsided but refusing to show it. My mother's lips were pressed into a tight line, her eyes narrowed as if searching for the punchline to a joke she didn't find funny. And Vanessa looked like someone had just told her the world was flat. Complete disbelief. They hadn't known I was nominated. They probably hadn't even realized Summit Stays had grown enough to be on anyone's radar for these awards. In their minds, I was still the daughter who couldn't measure up, who had walked away from the family legacy to pursue a foolish dream. I accepted the heavy crystal award, its edges catching the light as I stepped up to the microphone. The spotlight was warm on my face as I looked out at the crowd, at all those expectant faces waiting to hear what the youngest CEO of the year had to say. "Thank you," I began, my voice steadier than I expected. 5 years ago, I started Summit Stays with a vision that many people told me was impossible. They said the market wouldn't support another hotel chain. They said customers wouldn't pay more for sustainability and authentic experiences. They said I was chasing a trend that would fade. I paused, allowing myself one brief glance at my family's table. What those people didn't understand was that this wasn't a trend. It was a fundamental shift in what travelers value. They want more than just a place to sleep. They want to connect with the places they visit, to leave feeling enriched rather than just rested. They want to know their choices aren't harming the planet. I lifted the award slightly. This recognition belongs to every member of the Summit Stays team, who believed in this vision enough to help build. It belongs to our guests, who trusted us with their precious time away from home. And it belongs to everyone who told me it couldn't be done. Because sometimes, being told you can't do something is exactly the motivation you need to prove that you can. The applause washed over me like a wave as I made my way back to my table. I didn't look at my family again. Tonight wasn't about them, it was about everything I'd built, despite them. After the ceremony, people crowded around me offering congratulations, asking for business cards, suggesting potential partnership. In the midst of it all, I felt a hand on my arm and turned to find Vanessa standing there, her smile as practiced as ever. "Congratulations, sis," she said, kissing the air near my cheek. "What a surprise." "Is it?" I asked, keeping my voice pleasant. "Well, yes, we had no idea Summit Stays was doing so well." Her eyes darted to the award in my hand. "Daddy and Mother wanted me to invite you to join us for a drink, to celebrate 5 years of silence, and now they wanted to celebrate." I almost, "Please thank them for the invitation," I said, "but I already have plans with my team." Her smile faltered just slightly. "Lauren, don't be difficult. It's just a drink. Family should celebrate together. Family should support each other always, not just when there's success to claim a piece of," I replied, still smiling. "Enjoy your evening, Vanessa." I turned away, leaving her standing there, mouth slightly open as if she couldn't quite process the rejection. Marcus appeared at my side, a knowing look in his eyes. "The car's ready whenever you are," he said, deftly steering me toward another group of well-wishers. "But your team is gathering at the loft for champagne if you'd like to join." "The loft sounds perfect," I said, grateful once again for his intuition. As we made our way toward the exit, I felt eyes following me. I didn't need to turn to know they belonged to my parents, probably already calculating how to spin this development to their advantage. In their world, success was a commodity to be leveraged, not celebrated for its own sake. The night air was cooler now as we stepped outside, the stars visible despite the city light. I took a deep breath, letting the reality of the evening settle over me. CEO of the Year. External validation wasn't why I'd built Summit Stays, but I couldn't deny the satisfaction of having my vision recognized. "You know they're going to call tomorrow," Marcus said as we waited for the valet to bring my car around. "They'll act like nothing happened and try to find a way to associate Porter Hospitality with your success." I nodded, unsurprised by his assessment. Marcus had been with me since the beginning. One of the few people who'd left Porter Hospitality when I did. He knew my family almost as well as I did. "Let them call," I said, the award a solid weight in my hands. "I'm not answering." The valet pulled up with my car, and I slipped him a generous tip. As I settled into the driver's seat, I caught sight of my parents emerging from the convention center, my father's arm around Vanessa's shoulders, my mother scanning the parking lot with narrowed eyes, looking for me perhaps, or just anxious to escape before anyone could ask why they hadn't been sitting with their award-winning daughter. I started the engine and pulled away, not bothering to wait. They hadn't seen me, truly seen me, in years. But as I drove toward the loft toward the team that had believed in me when no one else did, I realized something important. I no longer needed them to see me. I had built something real, something that mattered, and I had done it on my own terms. The loft was buzzing when I arrived, the industrial chic space filled with the Summit Stays team, celebrating not just my award, but all we had accomplished together. As I moved through the crowd, accepting hugs and congratulations, I felt a weight lifting, a weight I hadn't fully acknowledged until it was gone. Emma, our head of sustainable operations, clinked a fork against her glass, calling for everyone's attention. "A toast," she announced, raising her champagne flute, "to Lauren Porter, who saw possibilities where others saw obstacles, who built a company based on values, not just profit, and who never ever gave up, even when giving up would have been the easiest choice. To Lauren, the room echoed, glasses raised. As I looked around at these faces, people who had taken chances on my vision, who had worked late nights and early mornings to bring it to life, I felt something my family had never given me: belonging. These people weren't with me because of obligation or shared DNA. They were with me because they chose to be, because they believed in what we were building together. Later that night, as I placed the Crystal Award on my mantle, my phone buzzed with a text from my mother. "Your father and I would like to discuss a potential collaboration between Porter Hospitality and Summit Stays. Lunch tomorrow. Eleanor Porter." Not even a congratulations. Just business. As always, I set the phone down without replying, and walked to the window of my apartment, looking out at the city light. 5 years ago, when I walked out of Porter Hospitality for the last time, I had been terrified. I had no investors, no safety net, just a business plan that everyone had rejected, and a determination born from years of being told I wasn't enough. My first office had been a corner table at a coffee shop. My first employee had been Marcus, who believed in me enough to take a pay cut and work out of that same coffee shop. My first property had been a rundown motel in Maine that the owner was desperate to sell. We had renovated it ourselves, painting walls on weekends, sourcing local artwork, connecting with area businesses to create authentic experiences for our guests. That first year had been brutal. I had maxed out credit cards, eaten ramen for dinner more nights than I could count, and fallen asleep at my desk so often that I'd started keeping a pillow and blanket there. But that first property had turned a profit within 6 months. The second had done even better. By year 3 we had investors calling us, not the other way around. Now Summit Stays had 27 properties across the country, each one unique to its location, each one built on the principles of sustainability and authentic experience that my father had dismissed as a passing fad. We employed over 500 people, had partnerships with local businesses in every community where we operated, and had just been named one of the country's most innovative companies by Business Forward magazine, and tonight, CEO of the Year. Not because I had the right last name or because I played by the established rules, but because I had created something genuine and necessary. My phone buzzed again. Another text from my mother. "Lauren, your father insists on meeting. This is important." I smiled slightly, imagining the conversation happening at their house right now. My father, realizing too late that the daughter he had written off had built something valuable without him. My mother, trying to find a way to spin this to their advantage. Vanessa, probably seething that her less capable sister had somehow managed to outshine her. They wanted a piece of what I'd built. They wanted to attach the Porter Hospitality name to Summit Stays now that it was successful. Now that it had been validated by people whose opinions they respect. They wanted to pretend they had supported me all along, but I didn't need their validation anymore. I didn't need their approval or their connections or their conditional love. I had built something real, something that reflected my values, not theirs. I had found my own measure of success. I picked up my phone and typed a simple response. "No thank you. I'm not interested in a collaboration. Congratulations on Porter Hospitality's continued success, Lauren." Then I turned off my phone, poured myself a glass of wine, and sat on my balcony, looking up at the stars. Tomorrow would bring its own challenges: the expansion into international markets, the new sustainable building initiatives, the community impact programs we were developing. But tonight, I would allow myself to celebrate not just the award, but the journey. A journey that had started with those crushing words in my father's office. Some people just don't have what it takes. He had been right. Some people don't have what it takes to sacrifice their values for profit. Some people don't have what it takes to step on others to climb higher. Some people don't have what it takes to live someone else's definition of success. Those people like me, have to find their own path. And sometimes, that path leads to places no one else could have imagined. I raised my glass to the night sky, to whatever force had given me the courage to walk away and the strength to build something new. "Here's to measuring up," I whispered, on my own terms. The morning after the awards ceremony, I woke to sunlight streaming through my bedroom windows. For a moment I lay still, letting the events of the previous night settle into reality. The Crystal Award sat on my nightstand, catching the light and throwing tiny rainbows across my ceiling. My phone, which I'd turned back on before falling asleep, showed 17 missed calls, 5 from my mother, 3 from my father, and 9 from Vanessa. There were twice as many text messages, each one more insistent than the last. I scrolled through them without reading, then set the phone aside. Today was about celebrating with the people who had actually been there for the journey. I showered and dressed, choosing a casual outfit for the team brunch I'd planned at my apartment. As I brewed coffee, my doorbell rang, and I opened it to find Marcus balancing a tower of pastry boxes. I may have gone overboard, he admitted, navigating his way to my kitchen island, but Henri at the bakery insisted on sending their entire morning selection when I mentioned it was for you. Henri's croissants are worth celebrating all on their own, I laughed, helping him unpack the boxes. The buttery scent of fresh pastries filled the air, mingling with the coffee. The others should be here soon. Before they arrive, Marcus said, his tone shifting to something more serious. You should know that Porter Hospitality issued a press release this morning. My hands stilled on the pastry box. About? He pulled out his phone and handed it to me. The headline read, Porter Hospitality Group congratulates family member Lauren Porter on award, announces potential collaboration. Heat rose to my face as I scanned the article. According to the press release, my groundbreaking work with Summit Stays reflected the innovative spirit fostered during her formative years at Porter Hospitality, and discussions were underway about bringing Summit Stays' boutique approach to select Porter property. They're unbelievable, I muttered, handing the phone back to Marcus. Not a word of this is true. What do you want to do? He asked, already reaching for his laptop. We can issue our own statement. I took a deep breath, considering this was exactly what I should have expected. My family trying to co-opt my success to rewrite history in a way that served their narrative. They hadn't changed. They never would. Draft something simple, I said finally. Just the fact Summit Stays congratulates Porter Hospitality on their continued success, but wishes to clarify that no collaboration discussions are underway or planned. We remain committed to our independent path forward. Marcus nodded, typing quickly. Professional and clear. I like it. Send it to legal before releasing, I added, returning to the pastry arrangement. And then let's not give it another thought. Today is about celebration, not damage control. By noon, my apartment was filled with the core Summit Stays team, 15 people who had been with me through the toughest challenges and the biggest victory. We ate Henri's pastries, drank mimosas, and laughed about the early days when we'd all crowded around 2 tables at the coffee shop, taking turns using the single outlet to charge our laptop. Remember when the pipe burst at the main property, and Lauren showed up with rubber boots and a toolbox? Emma said, refilling her glass. The plumber was 3 days out, and she just said YouTube has tutorials for everything. And somehow fixed it, added Zach, our head of guest experience. That's when I knew we were going to make it. Any CEO willing to get that dirty to keep things running isn't going to let a company fail. I smiled, remembering that day. The freezing water, the panic of potentially having to cancel reservations, the determination that had pushed me to find a solution no matter what. I had no idea what I was doing, I admitted. I just knew we couldn't afford to close even for a day. That's what makes you different, said Rena, our marketing director. You never saw problems as roadblocks, just detours to navigate. As the conversation flowed around me, I felt a deep sense of gratitude. These people had taken chances on a startup with an unproven concept. They had worked ridiculous hours for less pay than they deserved. They had believed in Summit Stays, and in me when virtually no one else did. My phone buzzed again, my father's name lighting up the screen. I declined the call without comment. Your family's still trying? Rena asked, noticing the gesture. I nodded. They issued a press release claiming we're in collaboration talks. A chorus of disbelieving exclamations rose from around the table. The same family business that told you your boutique hotel concept would never work? Zach asked, incredulous. The same one, I confirmed. The same sister who used to take credit for your idea, Emma added, eyebrows raised. One and the same, Marcus raised his glass. Then here's to proving them wrong. And to continuing to do so. To proving them wrong. Everyone echoed. Glasses clinking. Later, After my team had left and I was cleaning up the last of the brunch dishes, my doorbell rang again. I wasn't expecting anyone else, and a sense of wariness crept over me as I approached the door and checked the peephole. Vanessa stood in the hallway, perfectly put together as always in a cream-colored suit. Her hair swept into an elegant updo. I considered pretending I wasn't home, but she had obviously seen the team leaving and would know I was here. With a sigh, I opened the door but didn't step aside to let her in. "Vanessa," I said, keeping my voice neutral. "This is unexpected." "You haven't been answering your phone," she replied, as if that explained her presence. "I've been busy," she sighed dramatically. "Lauren, don't be difficult. May I come in?" This is hardly a conversation for the hallway. Against my better judgment, I stepped back, allowing her into my apartment. Her eyes darted around, taking in the high ceilings, the wall of windows overlooking the city, the modern furniture that reflected my own taste rather than our mother's preference for antique. "Nice place," she said, though her tone suggested she found it lacking. "Doing well for yourself, I see. What do you want, Vanessa?" I asked, crossing my arms. "I saw the press release. If you're here about the non-existent collaboration, you can save your breath. It's not happening." She perched on the edge of my sofa, crossing her legs at the ankle in that prum way our mother had taught us. "Don't be hasty. You haven't even heard the offer. I don't need to. Summit Stays is doing fine on its own." "Yes, we've all seen the award," she said, a flash of something. Resentment? Crossing her face before she composed it back into a pleasant mask. "Very impressive. But imagine what you could do with Porter Hospitality's resources behind you." I almost laughed. "The same resources that were withheld when I actually needed them. No thank you." She sighed again, this time with an edge of impatience. "Lauren, that was business. You weren't ready for the role you wanted. Your ideas were untested. And now they're proven successful," I said. "Funny how that works. Which is exactly why this collaboration makes sense now," she pressed, leaning forward slightly. "Your boutique concept has demonstrated market viability. Our infrastructure and client base could help you scale much faster than you could alone." I studied my sister's face, trying to see the girl I'd once shared secrets with, the one who had helped me build blanket forts and catch fireflies on summer evenings. Somewhere along the way, that girl had been replaced by this polished corporate executive who saw relationships as transactions and family as just another business asset to leverage. "Why now, Vanessa?" I asked quietly. 5 years of silence, and suddenly you want to collaborate. You didn't even acknowledge Summit Stays existed until last night." A flicker of discomfort crossed her face. "That's not entirely true. We've been watching your progress." "Watching," I repeated, "but not supporting, not calling to say congratulations when we opened our 10th property. Not reaching out when Business Forward featured us. Just watching, and waiting for us to become valuable enough to be worth your attention." She had the grace to look slightly embarrassed, but recovered quickly. "Lauren, in business, timing is everything. Your concept needed to prove itself before it made sense for us to get involved. And that's exactly the problem," I said, moving toward the door to signal that our conversation was over. "To you, to Mom and Dad, everything is just business. Even family. I'm not interested in being another acquisition for Porter Hospitality." Vanessa stood, smoothing her already perfect suit. "You're making a mistake. Daddy is prepared to be very generous." "I'm sure he is," I replied, opening the door. "Now that there's something in it for him." She paused at the threshold, turning back with a look of genuine puzzlement. "I don't understand you, Lauren. This is what you wanted. Recognition from the family. A seat at the table. Now you're being offered exactly that, and you're turning it down." I considered her question, realizing that she truly didn't understand. In her world, validation only came from external sources, from titles and acquisitions, and the approval of people in power. She couldn't comprehend that I had found something more valuable. The freedom to build something authentic, and the knowledge that I had done it on my own terms. "Because I don't need a seat at your table anymore, Vanessa," I said gently. "I've built my own." After she left, I sat on my balcony, watching the afternoon sun cast long shadows across the city. My phone buzzed yet again. My father this time, probably calling to apply more pressure after Vanessa reported her failure to bring me in line. Instead of declining the call, I turned off my phone completely and set it aside. Tomorrow would be soon enough to deal with the fallout from our competing press releases, to address the questions from industry publications about the family rift, to refocus the conversation on Summit Stays' actual achievements rather than the Porter family drama. I wanted to savor the feeling of standing my ground, of choosing my own path even when the easier route would have been to accept their belated validation, and the resources that came with it. I thought about the journey that had brought me here, not just the professional milestones, but the personal growth. 5 years ago, I had been desperate for my family's approval, measuring my worth by their standards and always finding myself lacking. I had worked myself to exhaustion trying to prove I deserved a place in the company that bore our name, sacrificing my own ideas and instincts in the process. Walking away had been the hardest thing I'd ever done, and the most necessary. The first year after leaving Porter Hospitality had been a crash course in who I really was when stripped of the family name and connection. I had discovered strengths I never knew I possessed: resilience in the face of rejection, creativity when resources were scarce, the ability to inspire others to believe in a vision they couldn't yet see, realized. I had also found a different kind of family. The people who had joined Summit Stays in those early days hadn't come for a safe corporate job with a prestigious company. They had come because they believed in the mission, in the values, in the potential of what we were building. Their loyalty wasn't to a family legacy but to a shared vision of what hospitality could be. My mother had always insisted that blood is thicker than water, her way of reminding us that family loyalty should trump all other considerations. But I had learned that some bonds, those formed through shared struggle, mutual respect, and genuine belief in each other, were stronger than the accident of shared DNA. The next morning, I arrived at the Summit Stays offices to find a bouquet of flowers on my desk, not from my family, but from our team. The card read simply, "Proud to be on this journey with you." Marcus knocked on my open door, holding a stack of press clippings. "Our statement went out this morning. Most of the coverage has been positive, focusing on Summit Stays' independent success story rather than the family angle. But your father's been calling the office line every half hour." "Let him call," I said, arranging the flowers in a vase. "Have we heard from the Bay Area developer about the new property?" Marcus nodded, sitting across from me and opening his tablet. "They've accepted our offer. We can start renovations next month if the inspection checks out." "Perfect. And the community engagement program for the Denver location?" "Emma has 3 local partners lined up: an art collective, a sustainable farm, and an outdoor adventure company. All women-owned businesses, all excited about the collaboration." I smiled, feeling a surge of satisfaction. This was what mattered: creating meaningful experiences for our guests, supporting local communities, building a company that reflected values bigger than profit margin. We spent the morning in strategy meetings, discussing expansion plans and sustainability initiatives. Around noon, Marcus appeared in my doorway again, his expression hesitant. "Your father is in the lobby," he said. "He's insisting on seeing you." I set down my pen, taking a deep breath. "Did he have an appointment?" "No. He says he'll wait as long as it takes." Of course he would. Richard Porter wasn't accustomed to being denied anything he wanted, whether it was a business acquisition or his daughter's attention. "Give me 5 minutes," I said, "then show him in." After Marcus left, I stood and walked to the window, gathering my thoughts. This confrontation had been inevitable from the moment my name was announced at the awards ceremony. My father wouldn't accept rejection without a fight. It wasn't in his nature. But I wasn't the same person who had walked out of his office 5 years ago, wounded and uncertain. I knew my worth now, not as a Porter, but as Lauren, founder, CEO, builder of something meaningful. When the door opened again, I turned to face my father. He looked older than I remembered, the lines around his mouth deeper, his hair more gray than brown now, but his posture was as commanding as ever, his tailored suit a subtle display of wealth and position. "Lauren," he said, his voice that familiar mix of authority and condescension. "You're looking well, thank you," I replied, not moving to embrace him or offer my hand. "What can I do for you, Dad?" He gestured to the chair across from my desk. "May I sit?" I nodded, returning to my own seat. In my peripheral vision, I could see curious glances from my team through the glass walls of my office. They had heard stories about Richard Porter but had never seen him in person. The legendary hotel magnate, coming to his daughter's much smaller company, it was quite the role reversal. "Your press release this morning was unnecessary," he began, straightening his cuffs. "It created confusion in the market. It corrected misinformation." I countered. "There are no collaboration talks underway between our companies." "There could be," he said, leaning forward slightly. "Should be, in fact. Your little boutique concept has proven itself. I'll grant you that. Incorporating it into selected Porter properties makes good business sense. For Porter hospitality, perhaps, not for Summit stays." His eyes narrowed slightly. "Don't let pride cloud your judgment, Lauren. This isn't about the past. It's about optimal business strategy moving forward." I almost smiled at how predictable he was, framing everything in terms of business, as if that neutral language could erase the personal history between us, as if he hadn't told me I didn't have what it takes, as if he hadn't given away the position I had earned to my sister, as if he hadn't dismissed the very concept that had now won me the recognition he suddenly found valuable. "You told me my boutique hotel concept was a passing fad," I said quietly. "You said I wasn't ready for leadership. You gave Vanessa my position without even the courtesy of discussing it with me first." He waved a hand dismissively. "Ancient history. You've proven yourself now. I can acknowledge when I've made a miscalculation." "A miscalculation," I repeated. "Is that what you call it? What would you call it?" he asked, an edge of irritation creeping into his voice. "A betrayal," I said simply. "Of my trust, my hard work, my potential. You were my father before you were my boss, but you never acted like it." His jaw tightened. "I did what was best for the company, and that's exactly why this collaboration will never work," I said, standing up. "Because you still don't understand. Summit Stays isn't just about profit margins or market share. It's about creating something authentic, something that reflects values beyond the bottom line, values you've never respected." He stood as well, his height still imposing even though I was no longer the intimidated daughter desperate for his approval. "Values don't pay investors, Lauren. Results do, and you could deliver better results with our resources behind you." "I'm delivering the results I want," I replied, gesturing to the office around us. "We're profitable, growing, and making a positive impact in every community where we operate. More importantly, we're doing it while staying true to our mission." "Your mission," he scoffed. "This idealistic approach may work on a small scale, but it's not sustainable for real growth." I smiled then, realizing he truly couldn't see it. The landscape of hospitality was changing. Travelers were increasingly choosing authentic experiences over generic luxury. Sustainability wasn't just a marketing buzzword, but a business imperative. Community engagement wasn't charity but a competitive advantage. Porter hospitality, for all its size and history, was stuck in the past. My father, for all his business acumen, was blind to the future. "Our approaches are fundamentally incompatible," I said, moving toward the door. "Summit Stays will remain independent. We're not interested in a collaboration, acquisition, or any other arrangement with Porter Hospitality." He followed me, his voice lowering to ensure only I could hear. "Don't be foolish, Lauren. You've made your point. You've proven you can succeed on your own. But there's a ceiling to what you can accomplish without our resources." I opened the door, standing aside to let him pass. "I'd rather define my own success than accept your limitations of what's possible." He paused in the doorway, studying my face as if seeing me clearly for the first time. "You really mean it, don't you? You're turning down Porter Hospitality." "I'm choosing Summit Stays," I corrected. "I'm choosing the company I built, the team that believed in me, and the vision we share. It's not about rejecting you, Dad. It's about embracing what I've created." Something flickered across his face, surprise perhaps, or a reluctant respect. But it was quickly replaced by the mask of the businessman, calculating and composed. "The offer won't remain open indefinitely," he said, a final attempt at leverage. "I understand," I replied, extending my hand formally. "Thank you for coming by." He looked at my outstretched hand for a moment before taking it. Our handshake brief and impersonal. Then he turned and walked through the open office, past the curious stares of my team, his back straight and his steps measured. I watched him go, feeling not triumph or vindication, but a quiet certainty that I had made the right choice. Not just today, but 5 years ago when I had walked away from the path he had laid out for me. As the elevator doors closed behind him, Marcus appeared at my side. Are you I nodded, surprised to find it was true. I am, better than okay, actually. So no collaboration with Porter Hospitality? He asked, though he already knew the answer. No collaboration, I confirmed. Summit Stays continues on its own path. Good, he said simply, because that Denver property isn't going to renovate itself, and we have a sustainability meeting in 15 minutes. I smiled, grateful for his steadiness, for the way he always brought me back to the work at hand. Then let's get to it. As we walked toward the conference room, I glanced back at the elevator my father had just exited. For so long, I had defined myself in relation to him, seeking his approval, measuring my worth by his standards, trying to prove myself worthy of the Porter name. But somewhere along the way I had stopped needing his validation. I had found my own measure of success, my own definition of what mattered. I had built something real, something that reflected who I truly was, not who my family had expected me to be. The Summit Stays team waited in the conference room, ready to tackle the next challenge, to build the next phase of our shared vision. These were the people who had been with me through the hardest days, who had believed in what we were creating when it existed only as ideas and dreams. This was my real legacy. Not a family name or an inherited business, but something I had built from nothing but determination and a vision others had dismissed. As I joined my team around the table, I felt lighter somehow, as if the last threads binding me to my family's expectations had finally been cut. Whatever came next, success or setback, would be on my own terms. And that, I realized, was the greatest achievement of all. 3 weeks after turning down my father's offer, I stood in the empty shell of what would become our newest Summit Stays property. Sunlight streamed through dusty windows, illuminating patches of worn hardwood floors and walls that had seen decades of history. The former textile factory in Portland, Maine, had solid bones, but needed extensive renovation to become the boutique hotel I envisioned. Emma walked beside me, tablet in hand, making notes as we discussed possibilities for the space. The original brick on this wall is in great condition, she observed, running her hand over the rough surface. We should definitely preserve it. I nodded, already picturing how the finished space would look, the contrast of exposed brick against modern furnishings, the way morning light would warm the natural textures, the sense of history preserved rather than erased. The local artist collective I met with yesterday had some incredible ideas for installations that would honor the building's industrial past. Speaking of local connections, Emma said, swiping through her notes, the farm-to-table restaurant 2 blocks over is interested in our partnership proposal. Their chef is excited about creating special menus for our guests and hosting cooking classes in that space we're converting to a demonstration kitchen. This was what made Summit Stays different, our deep integration with local communities, our commitment to creating experiences that couldn't be replicated anywhere else. Each property told the story of its location through partnerships with local businesses, artwork from regional artists, and activities that connected guests to the authentic heart of each destination. As we continued our walkthrough, my phone buzzed with a news alert. I almost ignored it, but Emma glanced at her own phone and raised her eyebrows. You might want to see this, she said, handing me her screen. The headline made my stomach tighten. Porter Hospitality announces new boutique hotel division Authentic Stay. Corporate policies that value standardization over creativity. Shareholders who demand immediate returns, and most importantly, they're doing this because it's profitable, not because they believe in it. I straightened up, feeling a clarity I hadn't expected. We have something they can't buy or copy: authenticity. We built Summit Stays because we believe travel should connect people to places and communities in meaningful ways. That's not a marketing strategy for us, it's our foundation. The mood in the room began to shift, determination replacing defensiveness. So what's our move? Marcus asked. We double down on what makes us different, I replied. We get even more local, more sustainable, more connected to each community. We tell our story, the real story of Summit Stays, more boldly than ever. And we innovate faster than they can copy. I looked around at the team, at these people who had taken a chance on my vision when it was nothing more than an idea scribbled in notebooks at a coffee shop. They want to play our game, fine, but we're changing the rules. Starting today. Over the following weeks, we implemented what the team came to call the Authenticity Initiative. We deepened our community partnerships at every property, featuring the stories of local artisans, farmers, and business owners prominently in our marketing. We accelerated our sustainability efforts, committing to carbon-neutral operations by the end of the following year. We created a profit-sharing program with community organizations in each location where we operated. Every step was guided by a simple question: what would Porter Hospitality never do? They wouldn't give employees paid time to volunteer with local organizations. They wouldn't source furniture from small local craftspeople when it was more expensive than bulk commercial suppliers. They wouldn't let each property develop its own unique personality instead of imposing a recognizable brand aesthetic. So that's exactly what we did. 3 months after Porter Hospitality announced their Authentic Stays division, I received an unexpected call from Olivia Chen, a journalist from Travel and Leisure who had written about Summit Stays in the past. "I'm working on a feature about the boutique hotel trend," she explained. "Given the recent entry of larger chains into this space, I'd love to get your perspective." I agreed to meet her at our flagship property in Seattle, a converted warehouse overlooking Puget Sound that had become something of a calling card for the Summit Stays approach. Floor-to-ceiling windows framed the water and distant mountains, while the interior celebrated the building's industrial past alongside work from local artists and craftspeople. Olivia arrived on a rainy afternoon, shaking water from her jacket as she took in the lobby with an appreciative eye. "This space never fails to impress me," she said, accepting the cup of locally roasted coffee I offered. "It feels so different from other hotels, even other boutique hotels." We settled into a quiet corner, the sound of rain against the windows creating a soothing backdrop for our conversation. Olivia started with standard questions about the boutique hotel market and our growth plans, but I could tell she was working towards something more pointed. Finally, she set down her notebook and looked at me directly. "I have to ask about Porter Hospitality's new Authentic Stays division. Many industry insiders have noted the similarities to Summit Stays' model. As someone who worked there before founding your own company, and as a porter yourself, what's your response?" I had anticipated this question, had prepared a diplomatic answer about market validation and the evolution of the industry. But sitting in this space that embodied everything I believed about hospitality, those carefully crafted words felt hollow. "Imitation is said to be the sincerest form of flattery," I began, choosing my words carefully. "But in business, it's also a confirmation that you've identified a real opportunity." 5 years ago, Porter Hospitality dismissed the concept that Summit Stays was built on. Today, they're investing millions to replicate. I gestured to the space around us, to the reclaimed wood tables crafted by a local woodworker, the rotating gallery of artwork from Seattle artists, the staff who knew most guests by name. But what they're missing is that authentic experiences can't be manufactured at scale. Every Summit Stays property is unique because it grows from the community it's part of. Our staff have the freedom to create meaningful connections with guests because we value those connections over standardized service protocols. Olivia was taking notes rapidly. "So you're saying the corporate structure of a company like Porter Hospitality is inherently at odds with the boutique experience?" "I'm saying there's a fundamental difference between adopting a business model because market research says it's profitable and building a company around values that happen to resonate with travelers," I replied. "Our guests can feel that difference, even if they can't always articulate it." She nodded, then asked the question I knew was coming. "And what about the family connection? Your sister is heading their new division. Does that personal history complicate the competition?" I took a moment, watching raindrops trace patterns down the windows. The easy answer would be to deny any personal element, to frame this as purely business. But that would be another corporate response, not an authentic one. The personal history is precisely why Porter Hospitality and Summit Stays have such different approaches, I said finally. "I left because I wanted to build something that reflected values they didn't share. That fundamental difference remains, regardless of which concept they adopt." Olivia seemed satisfied with this answer, moving on to questions about our sustainability initiatives and community impact program. After she left, I remained in the lobby, watching the rain and reflecting on how far Summit Stays had come from those early days of uncertainty and struggle. We now had 32 properties across the country, each one unique, each one a testament to what was possible when you stayed true to your vision, even when others dismissed it. The road hadn't been easy, but it had been ours. 2 weeks later, Travel and Leisure published Olivia's feature, rather than the simple comparison of Summit Stays and Porter Hospitality's authentic stays that I had expected. She had written a thoughtful exploration of authenticity in the hospitality industry, using our contrasting approaches as a framework. While Porter Hospitality brings corporate efficiency to the boutique concept, she wrote, Summit Stays embodies the very essence of what makes boutique hotels special, an unwavering commitment to authenticity that extends from their sustainable practices to their deep community connection. The article included interviews with guests who had stayed at both Summit Stays properties and the first Authentic Stays location that Porter Hospitality had opened. Their observations were revealing. The Porter property was beautiful and the service was excellent, one traveler noted. But something was missing. It felt like their version of authentic rather than the real thing, another said. At Summit Stays, I felt connected to the place I was visiting in a way I never have at other hotels. The staff didn't just make recommendations, they shared their personal favorites, introduced me to local business owners, and made me feel like I was being welcomed into a community, not just checking into a hotel. The article concluded with a quote from me that I didn't remember giving, though it captured my philosophy perfectly. Success isn't measured by size or profit margins alone, it's measured by impact on communities, on the environment, and on the lives of both guests and employees. That's the true bottom line. The piece went viral within the industry, shared widely on social media and cited in other publications. Booking requests for Summit Stays properties increased dramatically, and we received partnership inquiries from communities eager to have us develop locations in their area. It was vindication of the purest kind, not just of our business model, but of the values that had driven me to create Summit Stays in the first place. A week after the article was published, I was working late in our Seattle office when my assistant knocked on the door. There's someone here to see you, she said, looking slightly uncomfortable. She doesn't have an appointment, but she's quite insistent. Who is it? I asked, glancing at the clock, nearly 8 p.m., well past normal business hours. Vanessa Porter. I set down my pen, surprised. After the Travel and Leisure article, I had expected some response from my family, but not a personal visit from Vanessa. Send her in, I said, straightening the papers on my desk. Vanessa entered a moment later, looking as polished as ever in a tailored suit, though there was a tension in her shoulders that hadn't been there before. She glanced around my office, the warm lighting, the sustainable furniture, the wall of photographs showing Summit Stays community initiatives across the country. Nice space, she said, echoing her comment from her visit to my apartment months earlier. But this time, there was no condescension in her tone. Thank you, I replied, gesturing to the chair across from my desk. What brings you to Seattle? She sat, crossing her legs and adjusting her skirt with practiced precision. That Travel and Leisure article was quite the PR coup. Congratulations. I didn't write it, I said with a small shrug. Olivia Chen drew her own conclusions that have made booking numbers at our first 3 Authentic Stays properties fall below projections. Vanessa said directly. No point pretending this was a social call. I'm sorry to hear that, I replied, and found that I meant it. Whatever our personal history, I took no joy in others' failure. The boutique market is challenging. It requires a different approach than traditional hospitality. She studied me for a moment, as if trying to detect sarcasm or gloating in my response. Finding none, she said, that's actually why I'm here. We're struggling with aspects of the boutique model that seem to come naturally to Summit Stays. The local partnerships, the authentic experience, our corporate structure makes these things surprisingly difficult to implement effectively. I leaned back in my chair, genuinely surprised by this admission. Vanessa had never been one to acknowledge weakness or uncertainty, not even as children. Why tell me this? I asked. We're competitors now. She hesitated, seemingly wrestling with her pride before continuing. I'm here to propose a different kind of collaboration than what Dad suggested, not an acquisition or a merger, but a consulting arrangement. We would pay Summit Stays to help us develop a more authentic approach to our boutique property. I stared at her, unable to hide my astonishment. You want us to teach you how to be more like us? Essentially, yes, she admitted, a flush rising to her cheeks. Look, I know it sounds ridiculous given our history, But the reality is, you've built something special with Summit Stays. Something that resonates with travelers in a way our attempt hasn't. I took a moment to process this unexpected turn of events. My sister, who had taken the position that should have been mine, who had dismissed my ideas for years, was now asking for my help. "Does Dad know you're here?" I asked, already suspecting the answer. She shook her head. "No, this is my initiative. Authentic Stays is my division to run, and right now it's not meeting expectations. I need to turn it around." There was something refreshingly honest about her admission, a vulnerability I hadn't seen in her since we were very young. For a brief moment I glimpsed the sister I had once been close to, before competition and our parents' expectations had driven us apart. Why would I help Porter Hospitality become a stronger competitor to Summit Stays? I asked, though without the defensiveness that would have colored such a question months ago. "Because you believe in the concept," she said simply. "You believe that authentic, sustainable, community-connected hospitality is better for travelers, for communities, and for the planet. If you could help shift even a portion of Porter Hospitality's massive footprint in that direction, wouldn't that align with your values?" It was a compelling argument, one that appealed to my conviction that the hospitality industry needed to change. But there were practical considerations as well. And what would Summit Stays gain from this arrangement? Besides the consulting fees, access to international markets where we already have a presence, introductions to suppliers who could help you scale your sustainability initiatives more efficiently, and she paused. A public acknowledgement from Porter Hospitality that the boutique hotel concept originated with you. That last item, the recognition that had been denied me for years, was surprisingly unimportant now. I already knew the truth of what I had built. I didn't need my family's validation anymore. But the other benefits she mentioned could help Summit Stays extend our impact, spreading our approach to hospitality to more communities and travelers. There was potential for real good here, if we could structure the arrangement correctly. "I'd need to discuss this with my team," I said finally. "This isn't a decision I would make alone." Vanessa nodded, seeming to relax slightly. "Of course, take whatever time you need." As she stood to leave, I found myself asking a question that had been lingering since she walked in. "Why didn't you come to me sooner, before launching Authentic Stays?" She paused at the door, a flash of what looked like regret crossing her face. "Pride, mostly, and habit. We've spent so many years seeing each other as competition rather than as sisters. It's hard to break that pattern." After she left, I remained at my desk, turning over this unexpected proposal in my mind. The old Lauren would have rejected it immediately, seeing it as a trap or a backhanded way for Porter Hospitality to co-opt what I had built. But I wasn't that person anymore. I had nothing to prove, no lingering need for my family's approval. I could evaluate this offer on its merits alone, what it would mean for Summit Stays, for the communities we served, and for the wider impact of our approach to hospitality. The next morning, I called a meeting with my core team. We gathered in the conference room overlooking Elliott Bay, the morning sun turning the water to gold. I explained Vanessa's proposal, watching their reactions shift from initial shock to thoughtful consideration. "It's a risk," Marcus said, always the voice of caution. "They could learn our methods and then terminate the arrangement once they've gotten what they need." "True," Emma countered, "but they can't replicate our company culture or the relationships we've built. And if we structure the agreement properly, we could protect ourselves while extending our impact." Zach leaned forward, elbows on the table. "I never thought I'd say this, but I actually like the idea. If Porter Hospitality starts adopting more sustainable practices across their properties, that's hundreds of buildings reducing their environmental footprint. The impact could be enormous." Rena nodded in agreement. And from a brand perspective, being recognized as the leaders who are teaching one of the biggest names in hospitality would only strengthen our position in the market. I listened to their perspectives, grateful once again for the team I had built. People who were thoughtful, principled, and unafraid to speak their mind. This was how decisions should be made, through open discussion and shared values, not handed down from above without explanation. "So we're considering this?" I asked, looking around the table. "With proper protections and clear boundaries," Marcus said. "I think we should." The others nodded in agreement, and I felt a weight lift that I hadn't realized I was carrying. They saw the same potential I did, not just for Summit Stays, but for pushing the entire industry in a more sustainable, community-focused direction. Let's draft a proposal then, something that protects our interests while creating real value for both companies. As we worked through the details over the following days, I found myself reflecting on the journey that had brought me to this unexpected crossroad. 5 years ago, I had walked away from Porter Hospitality believing I would never again have any connection to my family's business. I had been focused on proving them wrong, on validating my own vision in opposition to theirs, but somewhere along the way, that need for validation had faded, replaced by a deeper purpose, building something meaningful, something that reflected my values and created positive impact in the world. Summit Stays had never been about proving my family wrong. It had been about proving to myself what was possible when you stayed true to your vision. Now, ironically, I had the opportunity to influence the very company that had rejected my idea, not from a position of subjugation or compliance, but from a position of earned authority and proven success. This wasn't about forgiveness or reconciliation, though perhaps those might come in time. It was about moving forward on my own terms, guided by the purpose that had driven me from the beginning, creating a more authentic, sustainable approach to hospitality that honored both people and places. The final proposal we sent to Vanessa outlined a consulting arrangement that would protect Summit Stays' interests, creating a clear path for Porter Hospitality to develop a more authentic approach to their boutique property. We would provide training for their staff, guidance on community partnerships, and advice on sustainability initiatives. In return, they would pay consulting fees, provide access to their international networks, and publicly acknowledge that the boutique hotel concept that inspired authentic stays originated with me. As I sent the document to Vanessa, I felt a sense of closure mixed with new beginning. The wounded daughter who had walked out of Porter Hospitality 5 years ago could never have imagined this moment, returning not as a subordinate seeking approval, but as a leader whose vision had been so thoroughly validated that the very people who had dismissed it now sought to learn from it. Whatever came next, I knew this much was true. I had built something real, something that mattered. I had found my own measure of success, and that was worth more than any family legacy could ever be. 6 months into our consulting arrangement with Porter Hospitality, I stood in the lobby of their first truly successful Authentic Stays property in Charleston. The space hummed with guests enjoying the late afternoon light that spilled through floor-to-ceiling windows, illuminating local artwork and furniture crafted by regional artisans. A small group gathered around a local historian, sharing stories about the building's past as a cotton exchange, while others sampled wines from nearby vineyards at the daily tasting event. It wasn't a Summit Stays property, but I could see our influence in every thoughtful detail, the way the building's history had been honored rather than erased, the meaningful connections to local businesses, the staff's genuine enthusiasm for sharing their favorite local spots with guests. Vanessa approached, handing me a glass of sweet tea, a Charleston tradition done right, not too sweet, with a hint of mint. "Well, what do you think?" she asked, a note of uncharacteristic uncertainty in her voice. I took a moment to observe the space once more, to feel the energy of genuine hospitality that filled it. "It's good," I said honestly. "Really good. Your team has implemented the principles beautifully." The relief on her face was palpable. "The guest satisfaction scores are the highest of any Porter property ever, and the staff retention rates are unprecedented. People actually want to work here." I smiled, remembering our early conversations about company culture, about how authentic hospitality requires employees who feel valued and empowered. That's not surprising. When people feel connected to a meaningful purpose, when they're given the autonomy to create genuine experiences for guests, they're more engaged. That translates to everything: guest satisfaction, employee retention, even profitability. We moved to the rooftop garden, where herbs and vegetables grew in carefully tended beds, supplying the hotel's restaurant and cocktail program. The city spread out below us, church steeples and palmetto trees rising against the backdrop of Charleston Harbor. "I never thought I'd say this," Vanessa admitted, leaning against the railing, "but you were right, about all of it. The boutique concept, the community integration, the sustainability focus. We were so stuck in the traditional luxury hotel mindset that we couldn't see how the industry was evolving." The acknowledgement was surprising coming from my sister, who had spent most of our lives competing with me, rather than conceding any point. But the Vanessa standing beside me now seemed different from the polished, perfect daughter who had taken my position at Porter Hospitality, without a second thought. "What changed your mind?" I asked, genuinely curious. She was quiet for a moment, watching a fishing boat make its way across the harbor. "Honestly, failure. The first authentic stays properties we opened before your consulting were beautiful. Luxury spaces with all the right buzzwords in the marketing materials. But they felt hollow. Guests could tell it was just a corporate interpretation of authenticity, not the real thing." She turned to face me, a new humility in her expression that I'd never seen before. "It made me realize that you can't fake this. You can't just decide to create authentic experiences as a business strategy. It has to come from genuine values, from really caring about the places and communities you're part of." Her words echoed what I had tried to explain to our father that day in my office, when he had dismissed our different approaches as mere semantics. Vanessa had needed to experience the failure herself to understand the truth. Authenticity couldn't be manufactured or replicated through market research and corporate strategies. It had to be lived. "The board meeting is tomorrow," she continued, a hint of her old confidence returning. "The quarterly results for the Authentic Stays division are strong enough that Dad can't ignore them anymore. Your consulting agreement has been the turning point." The mention of our father sent a familiar tension through my shoulder. Despite the success of our consulting arrangement with Porter Hospitality, Richard Porter had maintained his distance, allowing Vanessa to serve as the primary liaison. I hadn't spoken to him directly in months. "Will he be there?" I asked, trying to keep my tone neutral. Vanessa nodded. "He specifically requested your presence. I think he wants to see the results for himself." I had expected this moment would come eventually. The consulting agreement had always been with Porter Hospitality as a company, not with Vanessa personally. Sooner or later, my father would want to evaluate the return on investment, to determine whether the arrangement should continue. "I'll be there," I said, turning back to the view. "But I'm representing Summit Stays, not seeking his approval." "Understood," Vanessa replied, and I was surprised to hear what sounded like respect in her voice. "For what it's worth, I think even he's starting to realize what you've built is something special." Back in my hotel room that evening, at a small, locally owned inn rather than the Porter property, I prepared for the board meeting, reviewing the quarterly results and the impact metrics we had developed to measure the success of our consulting cargug. The numbers were impressive by any standard: guest satisfaction scores up 28%, employee retention improved by 35%, and revenue per available room exceeding projections by 17%. But the metrics I was most proud of weren't on the standard financial reports. The Authentic Stays properties we had worked with had reduced their environmental footprint significantly, created meaningful partnerships with dozens of local businesses, and contributed to community initiatives in ways that went beyond traditional corporate social responsibility programs. This was the real measure of success in my view, not just profitability, but positive impact. The fact that these values-driven approaches also happened to be good for business was powerful validation of everything I had believed when I started Summit Stays. My phone buzzed with a message from Marcus. "Team sends their support for tomorrow. Remember why we're doing this?" I smiled, grateful once again for the incredible group of people who had joined me on this journey. They understood that our consulting work with Porter Hospitality wasn't about the Porter family drama or my personal vindication. It was about extending the impact of our approach, about pushing the hospitality industry toward more sustainable, community-connected practices. The next morning I dressed carefully, a tailored suit in deep blue that projected confidence without trying too hard, comfortable heels that wouldn't leave me shifting my weight during the presentation, minimal jewelry except for the small compass pendant my grandfather had given me when I graduated from college. "To help you find your true north," he had said, not knowing how prophetic those words would be. The Porter Hospitality boardroom hadn't changed since I'd last seen it. Still all dark wood and leather, still overlooking the city skyline from the 40th floor of their headquarters. The executives seated around the massive table were mostly familiar faces, though there were a few new ones who eyed me with curious interest as I set up my presentation. Vanessa caught my eye from across the room and gave me a subtle nod of encouragement. She looked professional as always, but there was a new confidence in her posture, not the defensive pride I remembered, but something more grounded and authentic. My father was the last to enter, commanding the room's attention without saying a word, just as he always had. He nodded briefly in my direction, his expression unreadable, before taking his seat at the head of the table. "Let's begin," he said, his voice cutting through the quiet murmurs. "Vanessa, please introduce our consultant." It was a strange formality. Everyone in the room knew exactly who I was, but I understood the purpose. In this context, I wasn't Richard Porter's daughter who had walked away from the family business. I was the founder and CEO of Summit Stays, a consultant hired to help Porter Hospitality's new division succeed. Vanessa stood, her voice clear and professional. "As you know, 6 months ago, we engaged Summit Stays to provide consulting services for our Authentic Stays division. Lauren Porter, their founder and CEO, has been instrumental in helping us reimagine our approach to boutique hospitality. Today, she'll present the results of that collaboration and recommendations for moving forward." I moved to the front of the room, connecting my laptop to the display system. As the first slide appeared, a simple title page with both companies' logos, I felt a strange sense of coming full circle. The last time I had presented in this room, it had been my boutique hotel concept that my father had dismissed without even opening the portfolio. Now, that same concept had proven so successful that Porter Hospitality was paying Summit Stays to teach them how to implement it. Life had a poetic symmetry sometimes. "Thank you for the opportunity to share these results," I began, my voice steady and confident. "Over the past 6 months, we've worked closely with the Authentic Stays team to implement a more authentic approach to boutique hospitality, one rooted in community connection, sustainability, and genuine guest experiences." I moved through the presentation methodically, highlighting both the impressive financial metrics and the less tangible but equally important impact measure. I showed before and after guest reviews, employee testimonials, and case studies of successful community partnership. "What these results demonstrate," I concluded, "is that authenticity is not just a marketing strategy. It's a fundamentally different approach to hospitality, one that creates value for guests, employees, communities, and ultimately, shareholders. When done with genuine commitment, it's also a significant competitive advantage." As I finished, the room was quiet for a moment before questions began. Thoughtful, engaged questions that showed the board members had been paying attention. I answered each one directly, neither downplaying challenges nor overstating successes. Throughout the discussion, my father remained silent, his expression thoughtful as he listened to the exchange. Finally, as the questions wound down, he spoke. "These results are impressive," he acknowledged, his eyes meeting mine directly for the first time. "Particularly the employee retention number. In an industry with historically high turnover, that alone represents significant cost saving." It was a businessman's observation, focusing on the bottom line, but I recognized it as the closest thing to praise I was likely to get from Richard Porter. I nodded, accepting it for what it was. "What would you recommend as next steps?" he asked, surprising me with the directness of the question. I had prepared for this, of course, but I hadn't expected him to solicit my opinion so openly. "I believe Porter Hospitality has 2 options," I replied, matching his directness. "You can continue to develop Authentic Stays as a separate division, implementing these principles within that controlled environment. Or you can begin to integrate these approaches across your entire portfolio, recognizing that authenticity, sustainability, and community connection are becoming what travelers expect, not just in boutique properties but in all hospitality experiences." He nodded slowly, considering, "And if we chose the latter option, then our consulting arrangement would need to expand accordingly. It would require a deeper commitment from Porter Hospitality, not just financial resources, but a willingness to reconsider some fundamental aspects of how you operate." A small smile crossed his face, so brief I almost missed it. "Always the disruptor, aren't you, Lauren?" The comment could have been dismissive, but there was something in his tone, a hint of what might have been respect, that made me think otherwise. "I prefer the term innovator," I replied evenly. "And yes, I believe the hospitality industry needs to evolve. The question is whether Porter Hospitality wants to lead that evolution or follow it." The meeting concluded shortly after, with the board voting unanimously to continue our consulting arrangement and to explore the possibility of expanding it to other divisions. As the executives filed out, my father remained seated, gesturing for me to stay behind. When the room had emptied except for the 2 of us, he stood and walked to the window, looking out at the city below. "Do you remember what I told you the day you resigned?" he asked, his back still turned. You said some people just don't have what it takes. I replied, the words still sharp in my memory despite the years that had passed. He nodded slowly. I was wrong. The admission hung in the air between us, unexpected and oddly weightless. I had imagined this moment so many times. My father acknowledging he had misjudged me, had dismissed my ideas without giving them a fair chance. But now that it had arrived, I found it didn't carry the emotional significance I had once thought it would. Thank you for saying that, I said simply. He turned from the window, his expression more open than I could remember seeing it in years. Porter hospitality was built on a certain model of hospitality, one that valued consistency, luxury and tradition. It served us well for decades, but the world has changed, and we failed to change with it. It's not too late, I offered. The results from the Authentic Stays properties prove that, thanks to your guidance, he acknowledged. Which brings me to my next question. Would you consider a more permanent role with Porter Hospitality? Not as a consultant, but as a division head, with full autonomy to implement your vision across our boutique properties. The offer was surprising, though perhaps it shouldn't have been. From a business perspective, it made perfect sense. Why continue to pay Summit Stays for consulting when they could bring me back into the fold, reaping the benefits of my expertise while keeping it in the family? But that was exactly the problem. To my father, this was still about the family business, about the Porter legacy. For me, Summit Stays had never been about the Porter name. It had been about building something authentic, something that reflected my values and vision. I'm flattered by the offer, I said carefully, but my place is with Summit Stays. We've built something special, not just a successful company, but a different kind of company culture. That's not something I'm willing to leave. He nodded, as if he had expected this answer. I understand. The consulting arrangement then? Yes, I agreed. I believe it benefits both companies, and more importantly, it pushes the industry in a positive direction. We shook hands, the gesture formal but not cold. It wasn't reconciliation in the traditional sense. Too much had happened for that, but it was a new kind of relationship, one built on mutual respect rather than the complicated dynamics of family. As I gathered my materials to leave, he spoke again. Lauren, one more thing. I looked up, waiting. I'm proud of what you've built, he said, the words clearly difficult for him. It took courage to walk away and start something new, more courage than staying would have. The acknowledgement was unexpected, and I felt a surge of emotion I hadn't anticipated. Not because I still needed his approval, I had moved beyond that long ago, but because it represented a kind of closure and an ending to the chapter of my life defined by seeking validation from my family. Thank you, I said simply, and left the boardroom for the second time in my life, but this time with my head high and my path clear before me. Outside the Porter Hospitality building, the spring air was fresh with possibility. I checked my phone to find a message from Marcus. How did it go? Instead of texting back, I called him. They want to expand the consulting arrangement, I said when he answered. And my father offered me a position heading their boutique division. Which you turned down, Marcus stated rather than asked, knowing me too well to imagine I would accept. Of course, I confirmed. But it was validating in a way I didn't expect. Not because I need his approval anymore, but because it feels like closing a circle. The concept he dismissed 5 years ago is now something he wants to build his company's future on. Poetic justice, Marcus observed. So what's next? I looked up at the Porter Hospitality building rising against the blue sky, then turned toward thinking about the Summit Stays team waiting for my update, about our new property under development in Santa Fe, about the community partnership program we were expanding across all our locations. Next, we keep building, I said, a smile spreading across my face. Better, more authentic, more true to our values. That's always been the plan. 1 year later, I stood on the deck of our newest Summit Stays property in Kauai, watching the sunset paint the Pacific Ocean in shades of gold and pink. The former plantation house had been carefully restored, with local materials and craftspeople involved in every step of the process. Solar panels provided most of the property's energy, a rainwater capture system supplied the lush gardens, and the restaurant showcased produce from nearby farms and fish caught sustainably by local fishermen. Emma joined me at the railing, handing me a drink garnished with herbs from our garden. The last group of guests just checked in. she reported. We're fully booked for the next 3 months, smiled. Not surprised, but still pleased. And the community workshops, filled up within hours of being announced. The Lee making class with Auntie Lilani has a waiting list 20 people deep, and the sustainable fishing excursion with Kai is completely booked through summer. This was what made Summit Stays special, not just beautiful properties and stunning locations, but meaningful connections to the places and people that made each destination unique. Our guests didn't just stay in Hawaii, they experienced it through the eyes of the people who called it home, learning about its culture, history, and natural environment in ways that fostered genuine appreciation and respect. The investors are thrilled with the expansion progress. Emma continued, 38 properties now, with 5 more under development. Did you ever imagine we'd grow this quickly? I shook my head, thinking back to those early days working from a coffee shop, stretching every dollar and wondering if my vision for a different kind of hospitality company was just a pipe dream. Never. But I'm more proud of how we've grown than how much. Our expansion had been guided by our values at every step, choosing locations where we could make a positive impact, working with communities to ensure our presence benefited local residents, maintaining our commitment to sustainability even when it would have been cheaper or easier to compromise. As the sun dipped below the horizon, my phone buzzed with a message. It was from Vanessa. Thought you'd want to see this. Board approved the sustainability initiative for all Porter properties today. Your consulting team's influence at work. Attached was a press release announcing Porter Hospitality's commitment to carbon neutrality across all their properties by 2028, along with a comprehensive program to reduce waste, conserve water, and source food locally wherever possible. I showed the message to Emma, who grinned. Look at that, the dinosaur is evolving. Slowly, I agreed, but significantly. When a company the size of Porter Hospitality makes these changes, it moves the entire industry. This was perhaps the most unexpected outcome of our journey, that Summit Stays' impact would extend far beyond our own properties, influencing even the traditional hospitality giants to adopt more sustainable, community-focused practices. Our consulting work with Porter Hospitality had expanded to include several other major hotel groups, creating a ripple effect that was transforming the industry from the inside out. Later that evening, I sat alone on the beach, listening to the gentle rhythm of waves against the shore. The stars were impossibly bright here, away from city lights, a glittering canopy that reminded me how small and brief our human concerns really are. I thought about the path that had brought me to this moment, the painful rejection that had forced me to find my own way, the struggle to build something new from nothing, the validation that had come not from my family's approval, but from the success of the vision they had dismissed. If my father hadn't called me worthless that day in his office, if he hadn't given my sister the position I had earned, if he hadn't dismissed my boutique hotel concept without even looking at it, would Summit Stays exist? Would I have found the courage to walk away and build something that truly reflected my values? Sometimes the worst moments of our lives become the catalysts for our greatest achievement. Sometimes being underestimated is the gift that pushes us to prove, not to others but to ourselves, what we're truly capable of creating. My phone buzzed again, this time with a message from Marcus, the team's gathering for dinner at the restaurant. Coming. I smiled, sending back a quick on my way before standing and brushing the sand from my clothes. As I walked back toward the warm lights of the property, I could see them gathered on the restaurant's terrace. My team, my chosen family, the people who had believed in the vision of Summit Stays when it was nothing more than an idea born from rejection. They had been there through every challenge and victory, had contributed their own creativity and passion to building something meaningful together. The success of Summit Stays belonged to all of us, not because of our names or titles, but because of our shared commitment to creating a different kind of company, one that measured success by impact as well as profit. As I joined them at the table, raising a glass to celebrate our newest property, I felt a deep sense of gratitude for the journey that had brought us here. Not just for the success, but for the struggles that had shaped us, for the moments of doubt that had tested our resolve, for the clarity that comes from staying true to your values even when others dismiss them. To Summit Stays, Marcus toasted, and to the woman who had the courage to build it. To all of us, I corrected, looking around at these faces that had become so dear to me, and to measuring success on our own terms. As our glasses clinked together, I felt a sense of completion that had nothing to do with external validation or proving anyone wrong. This was the true measure of success, not awards or accolades or even profitability, but creating something meaningful that reflected your deepest values and made a positive difference in the world. My parents had given my sister our family business and called me worthless, but in doing so, they had inadvertently given me the greatest gift of all, the freedom to define my own, to build something authentic that would never have been possible within the constraints of their expectations. Sometimes being underestimated is the beginning of your greatest achievement. Sometimes rejection is just redirection to something better than you ever imagined. And sometimes when you stay true to your vision even when others can't see it, you end up changing not just your own life, but an entire industry. That night, under the Hawaiian stars, surrounded by people who had chosen to build something meaningful together, I knew with absolute certainty I hadn't just measured up to my family's standard. I had created an entirely new measure of success, one that would leave a lasting legacy far beyond the Porter name. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.